Hello, and welcome to Cultivators Conversations, a new video series brought to you by Cultivate, where we're going to chat with a variety of people about several topics that may be of interest for people who have a desire to change the status quo. I'm Jeff, and joining me today is Clemens Wan. Clemens, hello and welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Hello, thanks for having me.
All right. And this actually is going to be the second episode of a three-part conversation about emotional intelligence, authenticity. Now, Cultivators Conversations is going to be about a variety of topics, but we're going to launch with like a three-part thread right out of the gate rather than one-on-one a la carte. And the conversation that we'll have today is inspired by an article written by Ron Carucci, if I'm saying that right, from the Harvard Business Review. Actually was published in 2018. But he posed the question, is your emotional intelligence authentic or self-serving? Which I thought was kind of interesting. And then when you read the piece, and the section of the piece that we read was really about, I guess if I had to put it into a really quick summary, because in the interest of time, it's about active listening and whether or not, it reminded me of, I've taken courses about being a good active listener or having crucial conversations, and it almost felt like some of the tactics that you're taught that make you a good active listener are being called into question about exercising good emotional intelligence. And I'm wondering, Clemens, kind of like if you have had any experience with either being an active listener or in a room with somebody who maybe you felt when they were listening and then giving you feedback, did you ever get a feeling that it was self-serving on their end, or that they were trying to take what you were saying and twist it into something they wanted you to go with? I think sales is a good way.
That's true. Yeah, I mean, that's a typical sales technique is to first say, well, that's a great question, and then you try to think of the answer. But it's often, taking the requirements and echoing it back. And part of my job, I work with different advisory councils and inform some of the board of directors that I've spoken with. And a lot of their techniques for running an efficient meeting is by making sure everyone has a voice, but also echoing back as a C-suite member what has been heard, and then just saying, well, let's punt it to the right person and have that person take, the next step with it. So it is I think a skill of active listening and rehashing what you've heard and what you've understood, and making the other person feel better about what they've presented and being heard is crucial throughout the entire career step. So you
Right.
can start from the very, very beginning as like a business analyst where you're just trying to figure out, how the current systems work, all the way to the executive positions. They all use that same type of
See,
activity.
it makes me think back when I was a product manager, right, and working with the business unit for digital product, and them saying, oh, we want this, and then right, you have to. To me, it was always in order to demonstrate that I understand what you're looking for, I do repeat it back, summarize it in my own words. And I will say that there were times, if I have to really self-diagnose, that I would take that and then say, and then twist it a little bit into where I felt was a compromise. But it was not in a self-serving way. It was in a way that I felt was a compromise, right? I can meet your business needs, but I also know there's going to be some technical requirements, maybe. And I
Yeah.
need them to be on board with their idea being changed a little bit during the process. So, reading the article, I really asked myself, like, was I doing the right thing? Or was it good
That's
emotional
interesting.
intelligence?
I split it as like yes and, which is like the improv piece, and then yes but, which is kind of like the wife piece where you would in a relationship you would hear. I I called the I love you but, which is you would kind of try to soften the blow by saying I love you first, and then you would kind of cancel it out with a lot of the
Use
other
that
things that you're
tonight.
thinking about. So I don't know if that's part of emotional intelligence, but it's recognizing the other person's feelings first really does soften the blow for sure.
Yeah. So another thing I took, another training I took in the past was a crucial conversations course. I don't know if you've taken anything like that, right? Where it talks about, right, when you said this, it made me feel, right? You talk about how something makes you feel, and because in a way for me to explain to you, it avoids a debate or an argument because you can't necessarily argue with the way somebody feels, right? It made me feel that way. You can't say it didn't. And it wasn't, again, it wasn't a trick or a tactic. It was in the interest of getting to common ground, right? So, again, kind of standing this up to against the piece where the writer, Ron, writes about taking something somebody says and then finding that compromise again that some people in a subordinate position when you're having a leader do it felt that they were being manipulated. But again, I kind of look at that and want to debate it and say, well, but sometimes in order to get to where we all need to go that's in the greater interest of the whole, if we disagree right now on this, we have to take a step back and say, well, do we agree on a more macro level? No, back up more. Keep zooming out until you find that common ground, and then you can begin to work back towards center from a place of agreement. And I feel like it's interesting because when I read his piece, I felt like that was almost being presented as, again, not being emotionally intelligent. And I feel like it is.
I, I feel like if you take it the other way, which is if you don't express the other person's ideas, uh, I mean, I know a lot of engineers who would rather kind of, I guess, say most of the facts and then present that as is. And then they wouldn't say they disagree with you, but they'll just propose more and more. So I guess that's the other way of, if you talk to a bunch of developers, they'll maybe go right into the code. And so that might just be the difference in the way that people are communicating. People that haven't gone to business school maybe don't know those tactics, and it might work on them in a different way from a developer. I know that a lot of project managers and product managers are able to speak with developers because they're almost talking to them in a certain way that they're not used to being spoken with, and I think that actually works well for them. But if you're trying to, debate a research report and going back and forth, maybe that's a different technique that you would use.
Well, I guess right in a developer's world too, if you're writing code, then there are a lot of very if-then statements, right? Or very, this is the way it is, or this is the way it isn't. You can't, you don't debate a fact, right? The fact is an objective truth.
Right.
So I think everything, I guess, becomes situational, right? It's nuance or it's context. Um, and then, so the end of the piece, then what I found kind of, like, I think he won me back over, I guess, was where he talked about where it's okay to own your idea or your opinion. So again, let's take the fact side out of it, but if we are discussing something about what we should do, like what should our goal or our strategy be? If I have an opinion, rather than try to mask it as active listening, yes, Clemens, that was very good of what you said. And what if, insert my opinion here as like a
Mm-hmm.
subtle, right, candy code, I guess some people sugarcoat it. Rather, he suggests that you own your opinion, and that people will actually respect it more or hear you more. And if you come right out and say, like, this is what I think, rather than, uh, I guess, try to use your own words against you. And would you say you respond better to that?
They're both valid. I think yeah, I feel like I've spoken to a lot of people, enough people to kind of overlook that, right? I always dissect it in my mind to kind of break it down to what I have to react to more than how they say it. And I don't know if that's like a high level emotional intelligence to kind of go over it or a very low level to just ignore it. But I recognize when it's being used and I just say, okay, well, it's fine. This doesn't change the fact that what you're presenting to me has a certain reaction that you're aiming towards, and then that's just the one that I give.
I think you're right. It matters in how you say it, right? Because, I mean, if I came in to hear this conversation and say,
Yeah.
this is what I think and you better like it, that's not. But if it's, hey, look, this is my opinion, this is why I think that way, and then maybe even demonstrate, but I'm completely open to, like, change my mind, right? And I think that's kind of in the spirit of the piece is if as a leader, it's okay to have your convictions or your thought. I mean, you're almost expected to,
Yeah,
but how do you
I
be open minded?
recently worked with a consultant who was a lawyer, And it was very, very interesting the way that things were posed, because at the same time, I feel like there was some business analysis happening, right? Asking questions about different problems and products, and just the way that the questions were posed were almost setting up for the tech that we were building. And it was just very fascinating to see. It's asking it in the lawyer form.
It's leading the witness objection.
Leading the witness, yeah.
So yeah, all right. Well, I mean, I do appreciate you coming. These are meant to be short, very quick conversation pieces. For those of you who are watching in the Cultivators community, obviously feel free to continue the conversation by replying in these threads, the thread underneath the video. As I mentioned earlier, this was part 2 of a 3-part series about emotional intelligence. Be sure to check out the 3rd episode, where we're going to discuss our need for approval, dressed up as self-awareness. That's going to be good. Thanks for watching the Cultivators Conversations. If you're a change maker with a desire to change the status quo, then join our Cultivators community by going to cultivateall.com/cultivators. Clemens, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
We'll have you again.